97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now and they'll match your first deposit up to $250. We got a lot of Eagles news, NFC East stuff we'll get into. Andrew DiCecco, 97.3 ESPN, InsideTheBirds.com. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Week 7 almost in the books. Tonight we've got Monday Night Football, Bears and Rams here on 97.3 ESPN. Let's start off with the news over the weekend, Andrew. Obviously, Desean Jackson, they made it official today. The Eagles did. 6 to 8 weeks, it looks like, that Desean will be out. He has that injury to the ankle. It is a non-displaced ankle fracture, which means we probably will not see Desean until maybe the last couple of weeks of the season, if at all. And obviously another injury for the Eagles. But I want to ask you, with Desean Jackson going out, and now that we know that he's out, and Jalen Reagor activated from the injured reserve, do you think there's a good possibility that we see Reagor play this weekend, and that he will then fulfill the Jackson role?
Well, I wouldn't rule out Jalen Reagor playing against Dallas, but I think it'd be more realistic to see a Week 10 return for him. But, you know, he'll be able to seamlessly take on that Desean Jackson role. But also, let's not forget about John Hightower, who's beginning to find his stride as a deep field stretcher. You saw him kind of the past couple of weeks, a couple 50-yard bombs from him, and I think you kind of see that rapport growing with Carson Wentz. And John Hightower's comfortability tracking the deep ball and things like that, he's starting to come into his own.
Yeah, so let me ask you about, Hightower. I know he's a guy that he had that drop, and that's what everybody remembers, but he got behind the defense again. He seems like he's getting open. How would you like to see the Eagles receiving core being used? Because there's our reports, and you could talk about this as well, that Alshon Jeffrey will play in the game on Sunday night. So how do you anticipate seeing this wide receiving unit, being used once, I say everybody's back, but we know Jackson will not be a part of it, but with Reagor, Jeffrey, Fulgham, Hightower, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, how do we see those guys being used?
Well, Fulgham's the X. There's no question about that. He's the X. When Reagor comes back, he'll be in there, and Greg Ward will be in there. I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside and Alshon Jeffrey will be complementary pieces, red zone options. And John Hightower will be that field stretcher that you put in there when you really need, a big play. I don't think that he's a player that should be playing 50 snaps a game. That's not really what his skill set kind of is intended for. He's not a big receiver, big physical receiver. He's a complementary piece, and I think that's how he's best utilized and how he will be utilized moving forward. And that's the way that I see that taking shape.
When you look at these playmakers, can you argue that you have the talent to be more effective? And what I mean by that is you see the scripted plays early on with Doug Peterson, and then you see majority of the game where there's nothing going on. It looks like it's horrendous. You can't move the football. Like, I saw it already be so damn effective earlier. What's happening? So when you look at these players, Hightower, Reagor, can you be more effective than what they have shown? Reagor hasn't been available, but the offense as a whole, these skill players, can they be more effective than what they have shown for majority of these games?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to see that. I don't know what's taking the Eagles offense so to get into that rhythm, but you saw it the last couple of weeks, particularly in the latter stages of the game when their backs are against the wall. You start to see Carson trust some of these guys, really, utilize their skill sets. You see, we talked about John Hightower stretching the field, but you also, you get Travis Fulgham on the short to intermediate routes and the jump ball situations. You saw J.J. Arcega-Whiteside catch a short pass in the red zone last week, and the week before that he caught a ball. These guys, there's plays to be made here, and for whatever reason, the offense is very restricted in the first half. There's not a lot of creativity, and they're kind of just, they're kind of just going through the motions, it seems like. And then it almost seems like they have to turn into high gear in the second half, and all these things are opening up.
Andrew, I want to ask you about Reagor because, CeeDee Lamb, obviously, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, they were some big names. Brandon Ayuk had a big day. Justin Jefferson, many of the guys. T. Higgins has even been very good so far. Chenault's been pretty good. Chase Claypool has been a lot of guys have been good who have been picked in those first two rounds. Somebody has to not be good. Is that Reagor, or do we think that he, like these other guys, is going to make an impact when we finally get to see him out there?
I would say if you're looking for a receiver that's not going to be good from that class, keep looking. It's not going to be Jalen Reagor. He's going to be one of those guys that's going to be talked about as one of the better receivers from that draft class. He just hasn't been available, so it's unfair to judge his production versus his peers right now. But he has all the tools. He has the traits that you look for in a top receiver. He can work all three levels of the field, obviously stretch the field, but he can also take a short pass to distance. He's good in space, and he can create yards after the catch. He does everything that you look for from your receiver, from a top receiver, and you're going to see that now that once he gets healthy, and suddenly his peers that are making all these plays, that won't be kind of brought to the forefront as often because he's going to be making plays in his own right.
Now, there was a lot of conversation when Jackson was back that Jackson and Fulgham were going to be a nice pairing, and then when Jackson got hurt, that Fulgham and say Jeffrey maybe not a great complementary. I mean Hightower, but are Jalen Reagor and Travis Fulgham to you a good complementary pairing?
Yeah, I think that's the ideal pairing, those two, because you're getting the someone who's 6'2", 215 pounds in Fulgham, who he's not a burner, but he's certainly not slow by any means. He's another one that can work all three levels of the field. He can high point the football, come to win in those contested catch situations. And on the other side, you have teams are going to have to respect the speed of Jalen Reagor, but he's not a small guy, and he's going to fight for those contested balls and, catch those balls over the middle. And he's kind of going to be like a Deebo Samuel type player. He's in that same build and that similar skill set. So teams are going to really have to pick their poison when defending those guys because that really isn't an ideal pairing, and it's kind of hard to defend both of those guys.
How about Richard Rodgers? Can he have the type of performance that he had last game until Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz start returning?
I think the opportunity is going to be there for Richard Rodgers. When you have some of these other guys, now the teams are going to have to respect the speed for John Hightower. Fulgham's emerged, obviously. There's different, and then you have the running backs prove, Boston Scott, obviously, that they can make plays in the passing game. You can't cover everybody, and Richard Rodgers is going to get single coverage, and he's a veteran, and he's proven that he can win in those matchups, kind of work the middle seam there, did some nice things on Thursday Night Football, 85 yards, I believe it was, and he's a pro. He's been around. He's caught some passes from Aaron Rodgers before. He's a good blocker. He is what he is at this stage of his career. He doesn't have much of an upside, but he is a reliable target and someone that Carson Wentz has a rapport with because he's been on and off the Eagles roster over the past couple of seasons, I believe, at least 3 times. So there was some comfortability there.
One guy I didn't mention at wideout is Greg Ward. Where does he kind of fit in with all this? All this infusion of new bodies at that position. You got Reagor, you got Jeffrey. Fulgham has kind of now said, hey, you can't take me off the field. What does that mean for Greg Ward? Is he a guy that, regardless, has to find a role?
No, Greg Ward's your slot receiver. He's been part of this resurgence when you saw the end of that December run last season and when the Eagles' young receivers have been making plays. Greg Ward's been at the forefront of that. He's not someone that's going to stretch a team vertically. That's not his game. But he's very good in space. He has great spatial awareness. He catches the football. He might have some of the best hands in the NFL. Let's be honest. Like he's made some very, very tough catches. It kind of reminds me of Jason Avant a little bit. But he's not going to create much after the catch, but he's going to move the chains. And Carson Wentz trusts him, which is, as we all know, that's that's pretty important because you see a lot of those guys that have been in and out of the lineup that have been open and Carson hasn't gone to them. But he has that trust in Greg Ward, and Greg Ward's got a role on that team as a third receiver, and I don't really see anyone challenging his position.
What were your overall thoughts on Carson Wentz Thursday night? First drive with the scripted plays looked nice. The last two drives were definitely beautiful, but there was some ugliness involved, throwing across the body, the interception. So how do you break down his game?
Yeah, Hunter, he's still playing that hero ball and almost going out there feeling like he needs to be perfect. Obviously, there's some of those passes that he threw in the first half were rookie type of, mistakes, rookie type of throws you would expect, not from someone of the caliber of Carson Wentz. But for some reason, when his back's against the wall, when the pressure's at its greatest, he seems to rise to the occasion and elevate his performance and those around him and get everyone involved. And he really was, he ignited that offense and propelled them to victory. And I thought he made some fantastic throws in the second half of that football game. And if he can put that together for an entire game, which he's been unable to really do for the better part of 2 seasons, if he can revert to that 2017 style of play, or even some semblance of that, the Eagles are going to blow the doors off the NFC East, which I know is obviously not saying much. But I mean, if he can put together a complete game, the Eagles are going to be just fine on offense.
What is your thoughts on the 21-day window opened on Jalen Reagor? We've touched on him. Jason Peters as well. When Peters is ready to play, if it is, in fact, on Sunday night, is Jason Peters your left tackle, or is he playing right guard?
No, Jason Peters is the right guard. It's Jason Peters, as great as he's been and as great as he can be, he's just not reliable enough to put out there at left tackle. Why stunt the progress that Jordan Mailata's made? Jordan Mailata is going to be a pivotal piece of the offense, likely, for the foreseeable future. Get him the experience that he needs, and so what you have in him going into next season, and you can kind of sort out the puzzle from there. Put Jason Peters at guard, then you're going to have Isaac Seumalo coming back. Then all of a sudden, the offensive line has some semblance of stability there, and I think that's kind of how it would be best be served moving forward.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought Seumalo. What's his status? Is there any idea when they thought he might be back and ready to play?
My understanding is it'll be after the bye week, but I know that from what I'm hearing, he's close. That is arguably one of their biggest needs right now. Getting him back would be an immense upgrade on that offensive line, needless to say. But that's why I think put him at left guard, then you got Kelsey at center, get Jason Peters at right guard. You don't know what's going to happen with Lane, but you get a Jack Driscoll healthy, add some depth there. But Mailata is playing well. His game against the Giants was obviously his worst game, I would say, since he's been the starter. I believe he was the Eagles' worst graded offensive lineman from that game. Sua Opeta was the next worst. But he's shown signs of development. So why stunt that by putting Jason Peters back out there at left tackle when Jordan Mailata's shown signs that he can be a piece of that line in the future?
Yeah, no, I agree with the Peters at guard. Seumalo, I'm interested to see what happens when he comes back, because I think Herbig has played well enough that he might say, I don't want to say, do you think Herbig deserved to keep a spot at guard, whether it be right guard or left guard, when Peters and Seumalo are healthy?
Yeah, Herbig's a player that really has surprised me because they've gotten a lot more out of him than I think anybody anticipated. Obviously, he started at Stanford and he had some success there, but he doesn't necessarily fit the mold of what a traditional Jeff Stoutland offensive lineman looks like. But he's held his own for the by and large for most of the games here. But I think he's best served as being a first guard, off the bench type guy versus being a starter. I don't know that his upside is fairly limited. But I think that he'll be in a role that better suits, who he is as a player as a backup.
How concerning is the Lane Johnson injury, though? I mean, it was the ankle, and then he had to battle it. I think 7 plays in, he went to the sideline, and then by the end of the game, it was another injury. So, it just seems like I give Lane Johnson a lot of credit because it's clear he wants to go out there and help Carson Wentz, but I feel he's going to need some rest. And with Jack Driscoll up in the air right now, I mean, I would imagine that this Lane Johnson injury is, it's definitely scary because we've seen the difference in the record when he's out there and when he's not out there.
Yeah, it's definitely scary because Lane Johnson's the best right tackle in football, and going in and out of the lineup is not ideal. He needs to rest that ankle. You got rested this week. If it were me, rested. You got the bye week, and then see where you're going from there. Maybe you get Jack Driscoll back. That's why, as I'm looking at the trade deadline as it's nearing, the right tackle to me, you're adding a veteran tackle that can step in should something happen, should Mailata falter or Lane continue to struggle with these injuries. I think they would be, it behooves the Eagles to add a veteran tackle here at the trade deadline.
Well, luckily, they play Thursday, so he has the 10 days off. I think he'll play on Sunday night, and then they'll have 2 weeks off for the bye, and then hopefully that'll get him ready to go for the back end of the season. And Driscoll, and you mentioned it, their line all of a sudden for the back end of the year could be Mailata, Seumalo, Kelsey, Peters, and Lane Johnson. That line right there should be good enough with the wide receivers getting out. If they could just stay healthy would be the big thing. I want to ask you about the trade deadline. Some people have talked about Ertz. He went on the injured list. Do you think there's a trade that happens with one of the veteran players on this team? Do you think they bring in a linebacker? Do you think that there's something that Howie Roseman has got his eye on for the trade deadline coming up November the 3rd, which is, by the way, Tuesday?
Yeah,
Tuesday.
I mean, it's going to be interesting because a lot of the players that would be most enticing, to kind of unload or from another team's perspective, or happen to be injured for the Eagles right now. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that shakes out. Alshon Jeffrey might be a player that you would consider moving for pretty much anything. If you can get anything for Alshon Jeffrey, I consider that a win. It's time to play the young players and just kind of go from there. I think Alshon, as great as he's been in times in Philadelphia, I think that's kind of run its course. As far as targets, Avery Williamson, the linebacker from the Jets, would seem to be a good replacement option at linebacker. He's not going to give you much in coverage, but he had 13 tackles yesterday. He's an instinctual player, gets downhill. He's good against the run, and he flows sideline to sideline. He's a tackling machine. I think he would be, an immense upgrade at the position. And then, whatever tackles may be able to shake free, I think the Eagles would be, the Eagles would be privy to kind of look under every rock to see what kind of veteran tackle might be available, just from a depth standpoint.
I want to ask you real quick because T.J. Edwards is going to be activated in the 21-day window, probably going to be able to play this week. Do you see Edwards and Singleton, or do they stick with Geary? Or do they go with Geary and Singleton? Do they go with Geary and Edwards and bounce Singleton?
If it were me making the calls, it would be T.J. Edwards now with Singleton playing. But knowing the Eagles, knowing Ken Flagel and kind of how he likes to deploy his linebackers and the rotation, I have a feeling it's going to be Nathan Gary and T.J. Edwards with Singleton coming off the bench and a little bit of Duke Riley as well. That's just the way that I kind of see it playing out. They really they were marching Nathan Gary out there even when Edwards was healthy. They obviously they felt that he was the best option that they had. He was fronting their unit, and I think he's going to continue to do so. But like I said, if it were me calling the shots, it would be T.J. Edwards and Alex Singleton.
Now that we flip to the defense, I want to ask you about Roby Coleman. Has he been underwhelming to you?
Yeah, and he's someone, if you guys remember, that I thought that he was a bargain signing, and now you're kind of seeing why he might have been available. Prior to coming to Philadelphia, he was widely regarded as being a top 5 nickel defender in the NFL. Now, it hasn't quite worked out that way. He's struggled from a coverage standpoint, but he's also struggled in his tackling, which is one of his selling points. That was one of his areas that he really excelled at when you watch the tape. He was always around the football. He was aggressive. The Rams used him as a blitzer a lot. I believe he had 3 sacks. These are just things that you're not really seeing here in Philadelphia for whatever reason. But, however, as underwhelming as he's been, I would argue that Craven LeBlanc he hasn't been much better. So when you're looking at the two players, you want to go with Roby Coleman in that role, who has a little bit more of he has much more experience and an extensive resume. But neither player, in terms of nickel defenders, have been overly impressive.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much do you think plays a role that he was playing some outside corner? Do you think that messes him up and messes up his flow of things, that he had to play on the outside at times?
Yeah, I think so. And let's not forget, he's 5'. He's going to be smaller than every receiver he covers on the outside, no matter who it is. And so I think that presents its own different types of challenges. You're going to face not only different size receivers, but different skill sets. When you're in the inside, you're typically facing, shiftier players that are operating, in small spaces. They're a little bit quicker. It may not be the fastest, but I think he tends to match up with players like that on the inside a little bit better. So putting him outside definitely changes things up and shakes up his whole preparation, and it doesn't really play to his strengths.
Real quick, Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, dropped this morning at 6 a.m. Losing Ridgeway, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but you don't have Jackson, now you don't have Ridgeway. Does that disturb the tackle rotation?
Yeah, it is actually a big deal, and I know that Hassan Ridgeway's only played 14 games over the past 2 seasons, but he's been remarkably productive in a rotational role, getting pressure, stopping the run, and he's graded out very well from PFF. He's going to be a big loss. That's why I think that when you look at the 2 openings now that the Eagles have, I think one of them will have to be dedicated to someone like a T.Y. McGill, who I believe has been elevated twice already. So I think he would have to be signed to the active roster, if I'm not mistaken. All of a sudden, the position that they were deepest at now has kind of, like in past years, it's kind of get hit with a little with the injury bug. So it's definitely going to hurt the rotation, but you hope to get Malik Jackson back relatively soon, and hopefully T.Y. McGill can kind of give you somewhat of the production that you were getting from Hassan Ridgeway.
Let me ask you this then. You're starting to get a little healthy. Yes, you lost Jackson, which is a pretty big loss for them, but it seems like slowly you're coming around. Most people would say, this division's bad, but if the Eagles could just win those division games, they got that 5-game stretch where they're going to be an underdog in all 5 games. But does a healthy Eagles team have a shot to win some of that stretch in those 5? You got Seattle, Green Bay, New Orleans, Cleveland, Arizona. Not in that order, but does a healthy Eagles team have a shot to maybe knock off 1, 2, 3 of those 5?
Sure. I mean, think about the players that they will be getting back for some of those pivotal matchups. You're talking about a healthy Avonte Maddox, Dallas Goedert, Reagor, TJ Edwards will be back by then. Sayamalu, Jack Driscoll, Lane. These guys should all be available. Hopefully, knock on wood, they should be available for some of these matchups. So it's going to give them a puncher's chance when many are counting them out right now.
By the way, your boy Suopeta had a rough night, huh?
Yeah, he had a rough night, but we have to keep it in perspective. He's the 12th or 13th lineman that they're going to. It's his first NFL start. He wasn't going to be a world beater, but just to get that experience in case he needs to get called on again is going to be crucial to his development. Obviously he's struggled, but he does have some tools there that are worth developing, such as he's incredibly strong. He was, I believe, in the 2019 NFL scouting combine, he led all offensive linemen with 39 reps on the bench press. So there's strength there. But there's times where he looked lost, and he'll need to kind of clean that up.
All right, Andrew DiCecco. Tomorrow, by the way, Jim Schwartz is speaking, and Dave Phipps, so we'll have plenty of coverage of that during Football at 4. Doug Peterson speaks Wednesday. Jeff Mosher will be here for that on Thursday. Adam Kaplan is back, and then Mosher's back on Friday for Football at 4. So we got you covered all week long as we get you ready for Eagles, Cowboys. First place essentially on the line here. 2-4-1 versus 2-5. It never sounded so good. He's Andrew DiCecco, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, Andrew.
You bet. See you guys.
Yeah, man. Good stuff out of Andrew. DiCecco NFL. Follow him there. And, of course, read his Eagles coverage on our website, 973ESPN.com. Football at 4, it's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com. Win real money with their sports book along with casino games from the comfort of your home.